Everyone admired Hana's marriage. From the outside, it looked flawless, the kind of relationship people quietly compared their own lives to and came up short. Hana and her husband, Miho, were the couple others pointed at and said, "That's what love should look like." Miho was calm in a way that felt reassuring. He never raised his voice, never reacted impulsively, never let emotions spill where they didn't belong. To the world, he was dependable, disciplined, and deeply devoted. And for 3 years, Hana believed she had found something rare. Peace. She believed love was supposed to feel steady, predictable, safe. Hana lived a quiet life by choice. She worked remotely, kept her circle small, and treasured routine. Mornings were her favorite, soft light through the curtains, warm coffee in her hands, and Miho sitting across from her, reading silently. Those moments felt real. They felt earned. Miho always left early for work. He dressed neatly, moved with purpose, and kissed Hana on the forehead before leaving. He came home late most nights, but never empty-handed. Sometimes it was flowers. Sometimes a small dessert from a bakery near his office. Small gestures. Thoughtful ones. Friends told Hana she was lucky. She smiled and agreed. Because at the time, she truly believed it. But perfection has a way of changing shape when you stare at it too long. The first change was barely noticeable. Miho stopped leaving his phone on the table. At first, Hana told herself it meant nothing. People became more private over time. That was normal. But then came the muted notifications. The screen always facing down. The way his hand instinctively reached for the phone whenever it buzzed. Not rushed, not panicked. Controlled. Deliberate. When Hana asked about his day, his answers grew shorter. "Work's busy," he said. And she accepted it. Because love teaches you to protect the version of reality that feels safest. Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly, the atmosphere inside their home shifted. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough to feel different. Miho was still kind. Still attentive. Still present. But there was a distance in him now, a quiet separation Hana couldn't name. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Miho stood near the door adjusting his coat. "Late meeting tonight," he said calmly. Again. Hana nodded, but something inside her tightened. She watched him leave from the window. The same steady walk, the same composed posture. Nothing about him looked unusual. And yet, her chest felt heavy. Not with suspicion. With instinct. That quiet inner voice people often ignore because it disrupts comfort. Hana waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Her heart beat faster as she reached for her coat. She didn't tell herself she was following him. She told herself she was just going for a drive. Miho didn't head toward his office. He took unfamiliar roads. Streets Hana had never seen him use before. The city slowly changed, brighter areas fading into quieter, dimly lit neighborhoods. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then he stopped. Not at an office. Not at a cafe. But at an apartment building Hana didn't recognize. No sign. No welcoming lights. No sense of familiarity. She parked across the street, watching as Miho entered without hesitation. Alone. And stayed. Minutes passed. Then more. Hana didn't move. Her thoughts raced, but none of them felt clear enough to act on. Eventually, fear won. She drove home. When Miho returned hours later, everything about him was the same. The calm voice. The gentle smile. The practiced normalcy. He kissed her forehead and asked about her day. And that was the moment something inside Hana broke quietly. Because she realized the most frightening truth of all. Whatever Miho was hiding, he had been hiding it for a very long time. And he was very good at it. If this story is pulling you in, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people discover these stories. That night, Hana lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing. Slow. Even. Untroubled. And for the first time since their marriage began, she wondered. Who had she really married? And how long had she been living inside a lie? Hana did not confront Miho the next morning. She didn't ask where he had gone. She didn't mention the unfamiliar apartment building. She didn't even hint that anything felt wrong. Instead, she moved through the morning exactly as she always had. She poured his coffee. She asked if he wanted eggs or toast. She smiled at the same moments she always did. Her voice sounded steady, even to herself. Because Hana understood something important now. The truth did not reveal itself to people who rushed toward it. It revealed itself to people who waited. Miho noticed nothing unusual. He never did. He spoke about work in vague, carefully chosen phrases. He moved through their apartment with quiet confidence, placing his keys in the same spot, checking his watch at the same time. But Hana was watching him differently now. Every movement felt intentional. Every pause felt calculated. She noticed that Miho never answered his phone in front of her anymore. He stepped into other rooms when calls came in. When messages arrived, he always looked first, then decided whether to respond. Not nervously, deliberately. Hana told herself not to jump to conclusions. Love had taught her patience. Days passed, then another week, and Hana began to see patterns she couldn't unsee. Miho always left early on the same days. He always came home late on the same nights. And no matter how late he returned, his mood never changed. No irritation, no exhaustion, no emotional residue. It wasn't the behavior of someone hiding an affair. It was the behavior of someone trained to separate parts of his life. One evening, as they sat across from each other at dinner, Hana did something small but deliberate. "Do you still meet that client on Thursdays?" she asked casually. Miho didn't look up. "Yes," he replied instantly. Too instantly. The answer came before the question had fully settled in the air. Hana nodded, keeping her expression neutral. Inside, something tightened, because she hadn't mentioned a specific client. That night, Hana lay awake beside him, listening to the sound of his breathing. Slow, even, controlled. She wondered how someone could sleep so peacefully while carrying secrets so carefully. The following week, Hana began paying closer attention to details. Miho never left his phone unattended anymore. When he showered, the phone went with him. When he slept, it stayed under his pillow or inside the drawer beside the bed. One afternoon, while Miho was in the shower, his phone buzzed. Just once. Hana wasn't trying to invade his privacy. She only glanced. The screen lit up with a single letter. A. No photo. No last name. And one short message. Tonight stays the same. No mistakes. Hana's fingers went cold. There was no affection in the words. No familiarity. No warmth. It didn't read like a message from someone who loved him. It read like an instruction. Her first instinct was denial. She told herself it could be work-related. A code. A professional shorthand she didn't understand. But deep down she knew. This wasn't emotional. It was operational. That evening, Hana tested the waters again. "Will you be late tonight?" she asked softly. Miho paused, just for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled. "Yes. I told you about the meeting." He hadn't. But Hana didn't correct him. Instead, she watched the subtle shift in his posture, the way his shoulders squared slightly, as if preparing to step into another version of himself. After Miho left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. The walls seemed closer now. Not threatening. Observant. Hana sat alone at the table long after her food had gone cold. That night, she followed him again. This time, she stayed farther back. Miho drove across the city, away from familiar streets and into areas Hana rarely visited. The city lights thinned. The roads grew darker. Quieter. Eventually, he slowed near an industrial district. No cafes. No apartments. No pedestrians. Just concrete, metal, and shadows. Miho parked in front of a building with no markings. No sign. No windows. No obvious purpose. A keypad glowed faintly beside the door. Miho entered a code. The door opened, then closed behind him. Hana stayed in her car, heart pounding. This wasn't somewhere you visited casually. This wasn't somewhere you ended up by accident. This was somewhere you went when you didn't want to be seen. Minutes passed. Then more. No one entered. No one left. Hana eventually drove home, her thoughts spiraling. Later that night, while Miho slept, Hana did something she had never done before. She searched. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Methodically. Inside Miho's home office, she found a locked drawer. Inside it were printed documents filled with dates, times, and initials. A small notebook. A second phone powered off. No photos. No messages of love. No personal notes. Just records. And the dates stretched back years. Long before their marriage. Hana sat on the floor, the papers spread around her, her chest tight. This wasn't a betrayal of the heart. It was a life she had never been meant to see. She placed everything back exactly as she found it. Locked the drawer. Returned to bed. But sleep never came. Because now, the question wasn't what Miho was hiding. The question was, how much did Miho already know about what she had discovered? After that night, Hana understood that watching Miho was no longer enough. Observation gave information. But information without context only deepened fear. She needed to understand the pattern. So Hana began documenting everything. Not obsessively. Quietly. She wrote down the days Miho left early. The nights he returned late. The moments his mood shifted, or didn't. What disturbed her most was not what changed, but what never did. Miho was always calm. No matter how long he stayed away. No matter how carefully he lied. No matter how close Hana came to the truth. There was never guilt. Only control. A week later, something subtle happened. Miho stopped kissing her goodbye. Not abruptly. Gradually. The gesture shortened. Then disappeared. In its place came distance disguised as routine. Hana noticed, but she said nothing. She had learned that silence was safer than confrontation. One afternoon, while Hana worked from home, she heard Miho's voice through the slightly open office door. He was on the phone. His tone was low. Measured. Not the voice he used with clients. Not the voice he used with friends. It was sharper. More focused. No deviations, he said. A pause. Keep it contained. Hana froze at her desk. By the time she reached the door, the call had ended. Miho emerged moments later, composed as ever. Everything okay? He asked casually. Yes, Hana replied. But her pulse was racing. That night, she dreamed of locked doors and blinking lights. She woke with the sensation that something had shifted. And she was right. The next morning, Hana noticed a car parked across the street. Black. Unmarked. It wasn't unusual on its own. But it was still there hours later. And the next day. Always parked slightly differently. Always facing the building. Hana told herself not to imagine things. Until she left the apartment and saw the driver lower his head. As if avoiding recognition. Her chest tightened. She didn't mention it to Miho. Instead, she tested him. There's been a strange car outside lately, she said lightly one evening. Miho didn't react. Not even a flicker. Cities are full of strange cars, he replied. Then added calmly, you shouldn't worry so much. The words sounded gentle. But the message wasn't. That night, Hana's phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. No introduction. Just a single message. You went places you weren't meant to. Hana stared at the screen, her hands shaking. She didn't reply. Seconds later, another message appeared. For your own safety, stop looking. Her breath caught. This wasn't Miho. This was someone else. Someone who knew. Someone who was watching. When Miho came home, Hana studied his face. He looked exactly the same. Too normal. Too calm. She realized then that Miho might not be the most dangerous part of this situation. He might only be one piece of something much larger. That night, Hana didn't sleep. She listened to Miho's breathing, steady and untroubled, and felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. She was inside the danger. And no one else knew. The next day, Hana made a mistake. She returned to the industrial building. In daylight, she parked farther away and walked slowly toward it, blending in with passing workers. Up close, the building looked even more lifeless. No windows. No sign. No company name. Just concrete and silence. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. Another message. Sent seconds ago. You shouldn't be here. Hana didn't run. She walked back to her car calmly, every nerve screaming. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the same black car parked at the corner. Engine running. Waiting. She drove home carefully, obeying every traffic law, resisting the urge to panic. When she arrived, Miho was already there. Sitting at the table. Waiting. You've been distracted lately, he said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was an assessment. Hana swallowed. I know about the messages, she said. Miho's eyes darkened, just slightly. They're not meant for you, he replied. What are they meant for? Hana asked. Miho stood slowly. For people who don't understand when to stop. The room felt smaller. Hana realized then that the rules had changed. This was no longer about secrets. It was about control. And she had just crossed a line she didn't know existed. After that night, the air inside the apartment felt heavier. Not hostile. Controlled. Miho moved through the space with the same quiet precision. But now Hana felt the weight behind every gesture. When he placed his keys down, it was deliberate. When he poured water, it was measured. Even his silence felt intentional. Hana realized something unsettling. Miho wasn't pretending nothing was wrong. He was allowing her to sit with the knowledge. And that was worse. The next morning, he acted as though nothing had changed. He asked if she had slept well. Commented on the weather. Mentioned a meeting later that day. Normal words. Normal tone. But Hana noticed the difference in his eyes. They lingered longer now, as if he were studying her. Waiting. You've been quiet, Miho said finally. I'm tired, Hana replied. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. Miho nodded slowly, accepting the answer the way one accepts a variable that can be corrected later. After he left, Hana sat alone at the table, her thoughts circling. The messages hadn't come again. That silence felt intentional, like a reminder that whoever was watching didn't need to speak often to be heard. Later that afternoon, Hana stepped outside to clear her head. The black car was gone. For the first time in days, the street felt ordinary again. Too ordinary. That evening, Miho came home earlier than usual. No explanation. No excuse. Just presence. They ate dinner together in silence, the soft clink of utensils the only sound between them. Then Miho spoke. You've been asking questions, he said calmly. Hana looked up. I've been noticing things, she replied. He studied her for a moment, then leaned back slightly. Noticing isn't the same as understanding, he said. The words weren't harsh. They were instructional. Miho stood and walked toward the window, his back to her. There are parts of my life you wouldn't know how to carry, he continued. Not because you're weak, but because you were never meant to. Hana's chest tightened. So you're admitting it, she said quietly. Miho turned to face her. I'm acknowledging reality. That was the closest thing to honesty she had heard from him in weeks. You've been followed, Miho added. That wasn't my decision. Hana's heart dropped. So you knew? Yes. And you didn't warn me? You were already involved. The words settled heavily between them. Miho stepped closer. You don't need to understand everything, he said. You just need to trust that I can manage it. Manage what? The danger? The lies? Her life. Hana realized then that Miho didn't see her as a partner anymore. He saw her as a risk. That night, Hana locked herself in the bathroom and stared at her reflection. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Her face looked calm, but her eyes didn't. They looked alert, calculating. She understood now that waiting was no longer an option. The next day, Hana received another message. Unknown number. Different wording. Same authority. You are being protected. Do not resist it. Protected. The word made her stomach turn. Protection without consent wasn't protection. It was containment. That evening, Hana tested Miho again. If something happened to me, she said casually, would anyone notice? Miho paused. Just long enough. Yes, he said. Eventually. Eventually. The word echoed in her mind long after he'd gone to sleep. Hana lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts sharpening. Miho wasn't threatening her. He was preparing her, conditioning her to accept a smaller world. Fewer questions, less freedom. And that was when Hana made a decision. If she stayed passive, she would disappear slowly. Not physically, but completely. So she began planning. Not an escape, an insurance policy. She copied documents when Miho wasn't home, backed up files and sent them to a secure location. Changed small routines, nothing noticeable, nothing sudden. She learned to move the way Miho did. Quietly, deliberately, carefully. And Miho noticed. He didn't comment, but his eyes followed her more closely now, as if he sensed the shift. One night, as they stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, Miho spoke softly. Whatever you're thinking of doing, he said, make sure it's worth the consequences. Hana met his gaze. For the first time, she replied, I am. After that conversation, Hana understood something clearly. Miho was no longer testing her. He was monitoring her. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. He started coming home at irregular hours. Sometimes earlier. Sometimes much later. As if unpredictability itself had become a tool. Hana noticed that he asked more questions now. Not directly, not suspiciously, but strategically. Did you go out today? Who did you speak to? Did anyone come by? Each question sounded harmless on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. And Hana realized Miho wasn't looking for answers. He was measuring consistency. The black car returned. Not always parked in the same spot. Not always at the same time. But always close enough to be noticed. Once, Hana caught her reflection in its dark window as she walked past. Another time, she saw the driver step out briefly, pretending to take a call. No confrontation. Just presence. That was the point. One afternoon, Hana decided to test the boundaries again. She left the apartment without telling Miho where she was going. She didn't take her phone. She walked. 3 blocks later, she felt it. That sensation she had learned to trust. She was being followed. Not aggressively. Professionally. Hana turned into a small cafe and sat by the window. Minutes later, a man entered and ordered coffee. He never looked at her. But he sat close enough to watch her reflection in the glass. Hana's chest tightened. This wasn't protection. This was surveillance. When she returned home, Miho was waiting. "You shouldn't do that," he said calmly. Hana didn't ask how he knew. She already understood. "You don't trust me," she replied. Miho considered her words carefully. "Trust isn't the issue," he said. "Exposure is." Exposure. That was the word he always came back to. That night, Hana dreamed she was walking through a city with no exits. Every street led back to the same place. The next morning, Hana received another message. Unknown number. You are approaching a point of no return. No threat. No explanation. Just a warning. Hana deleted it immediately. Then she did something Miho wouldn't expect. She called an old friend. Someone from before her marriage. Someone with no connection to Miho's world. The conversation was brief. Careful. But it grounded her. It reminded her that a life had existed before this one. That she still belonged to herself. When Miho returned that evening, Hana studied him closely. For the first time, she saw fatigue beneath his calm. Not physical exhaustion. Mental strain. Whatever he was managing, it wasn't as contained as he wanted her to believe. "You're planning something," Miho said quietly. "I'm thinking," Hana replied. Miho stepped closer. "You don't need to do that," he said. "I can keep you safe." Hana looked at him steadily. "Safe from what?" she asked. Miho didn't answer. And that silence told her everything. Later that night, Hana accessed the files she had copied. She reviewed them carefully, line by line. Dates. Codes. Initials. Patterns emerged. And one detail stood out. A scheduled entry dated 3 days from now. No explanation. Just a time. And a location code she recognized. The industrial building. Hana's heart raced. Whatever Miho was involved in, something was about to happen, and she would be close enough to be affected. For the first time since this began, Hana felt fear sharpen into urgency. Waiting was no longer an option. She needed a way out. Not eventually. Not carefully. Soon. That night, Hana packed a small bag. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Documents. Cash. Essentials. She hid it where Miho wouldn't look. Under the floorboard near the back closet. As she slid the board back into place, her hands trembled. Because she understood the truth now. If she stayed past that scheduled date, she wouldn't be choosing safety. She would be choosing disappearance. And Hana had already decided. She would not vanish quietly. The days leading up to the scheduled date moved slowly. Too slowly. Hana felt as though time itself had thickened, stretching each hour into something heavy and difficult to breathe through. Miho noticed the change in her. He said nothing, but he watched more closely now. He stopped asking questions altogether, which frightened her more than interrogation ever could. Because silence in Miho's world meant preparation. The night before the date, Hana couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the city outside, counting the seconds between Miho's breaths, wondering how someone could be so calm while standing so close to destruction. At dawn, Miho rose quietly and dressed without turning on the light. "I won't be back until late," he said. Hana nodded. Her voice wouldn't have survived speech. After he left, Hana opened the copied files again. She read them carefully this time, not searching for meaning, but for intent. And slowly it became clear. Miho was not part of a single operation. He was part of a network. People who didn't exist on paper. Movements that didn't require permission. Solutions that left no aftermath. The industrial building wasn't a meeting place. It was a transfer point. People went in as one version of themselves, and came out as another. Hana's hands shook as she scrolled. The initials in the notebook weren't names. They were designations. Assets. Handlers. Observers. And Miho's designation appeared again and again. Not as support, but as coordination. He didn't just follow instructions. He gave them. Hana felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't about national security. This was about erasure. Lives rewritten. Identities dissolved. Histories edited until nothing recognizable remained. And tomorrow's date. Tomorrow was a handoff. Something or someone was being moved. And Hana realized with cold clarity. She was no longer just close to the danger. She was connected to it. That evening, Miho came home earlier than expected. His face was calm, but something behind his eyes had shifted. Resolve. You've been restless, he said. I know what you do, Hana replied. Miho didn't deny it. He took off his coat slowly, as if preparing for a conversation he had rehearsed many times before. What you know is incomplete, he said. You make people disappear, Hana said quietly. Miho exhaled. We give people exits, he corrected. From lives that would destroy them. At what cost? Hana asked. Miho didn't answer immediately. When systems fail, he said carefully, someone has to clean up what's left. Hana felt the weight of those words settle into her chest. You knew this would touch me eventually, she said. Yes, Miho admitted. I just hoped it wouldn't be like this. Like what? Hana asked. Like you understanding. That was the moment Hana truly saw him. Not as her husband, but as a man who had learned to survive by removing himself from consequence. You're in danger, Miho said softly. Not because of me. Because of what you've seen. And the date? Hana asked. Miho hesitated. Just long enough. You shouldn't be here tomorrow, he said. The sentence sounded like advice. It wasn't. It was permission. That night, Hana retrieved the bag she had packed. She checked her documents one last time. And then she did something she hadn't planned to do. She left a copy of everything on the kitchen table. Not as a threat. As a boundary. If she disappeared, the truth would not. When Miho came into the room, he saw the files immediately. He said nothing. He didn't stop her. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging a choice he could no longer control. Hana walked out of the apartment with her heart pounding. Every step felt irreversible. She didn't know if she was being watched. She didn't know if she would make it out. But she knew one thing with certainty. Tomorrow something would disappear. And she refused to be one of the things erased. Hana did not take the fastest route out of the city. She took the quiet one. Side streets. Early turns. Places that didn't trigger habits. She changed direction twice before realizing her hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. Every sound felt louder now. Every passing car felt deliberate. She kept her eyes forward, resisting the urge to check the mirror too often. Panic made patterns. Patterns made mistakes. Hana reminded herself of that as she drove. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. Buzzed again. Then stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the messages ever had. By the time she reached the outskirts of the city, dawn was beginning to soften the sky. She parked near a small train station and sat still for several minutes, breathing slowly, forcing her heart to calm. Then she checked her phone. One missed call. No name. No voicemail. Hana turned the phone off. The train platform was nearly empty. A few commuters. A maintenance worker. Nothing unusual. She bought a ticket with cash and boarded without looking back. As the train pulled away, Hana allowed herself one brief glance out the window. No black car. No familiar silhouette. For the first time in weeks, her chest loosened slightly. But relief was fragile. And it didn't last. 2 hours later, Hana stepped off the train in a smaller city. Quiet. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Exactly what she needed. She checked into a modest hotel under a different name. Nothing false, just incomplete. That afternoon, Hana slept. Deeply. Dreamlessly. When she woke, her phone was still silent. No messages. No calls. She told herself that meant safety. But deep down, she knew better. Miho didn't chase impulsively. He calculated. That evening, as Hana sat alone in her hotel room, she felt it again. That familiar tightening in her chest. She wasn't alone. A knock came at the door. Soft. Measured. Hana didn't move. Another knock. Then a voice. Room service. Hana approached the door quietly and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. Her breath caught. The knock came again, this time closer. More deliberate. Open the door, Hana. Her name. Spoken calmly. Miho's voice. Hana stepped back instinctively. I told you not to follow me, she said through the door. I didn't, Miho replied. There was no anger in his voice. No urgency. Just certainty. You knew where I'd go, Hana said. Yes, Miho admitted. Because you chose places that felt safe to you. That was worse than pursuit. It was understanding. I'm not here to stop you, Miho continued. I'm here to make sure you survive what comes next. Hana laughed softly, a sound that surprised even her. Survive you? She asked. Survive the aftermath, Miho replied. He paused. They know you left. Hana's blood ran cold. Who? She asked. The people you weren't supposed to see, Miho said. Silence stretched between them. You left evidence, he added gently. That makes you unpredictable. That makes me alive, Hana said. Miho exhaled slowly. You were never meant to be part of this, he said. But now that you are leaving doesn't erase you. Hana leaned against the wall, her knees weak. So what do you want? She asked. To finish what I started, Miho replied. And what's that? Hana asked. To get you out, he said. Completely. She closed her eyes. Freedom had never sounded so conditional. I don't trust you, Hana said. You don't have to, Miho replied. You just have to decide faster than they do. Hana looked at the door. At the thin line of space separating her from the man she once loved. What happens if I refuse? She asked. Miho didn't answer immediately. When systems lose control, he said carefully, they eliminate uncertainty. That was all she needed to hear. Give me 10 minutes, Hana said. You have 5, Miho replied. The footsteps retreated. Hana packed quickly. Hands steady now. Mind sharp. She understood something clearly. Miho wasn't her rescuer. He was her last advantage. And whatever came next would determine whether she disappeared or finally became untouchable. Hana didn't open the door when Miho returned. Instead, she waited. She listened to the sound of his breathing on the other side, steady and controlled, and realized something unsettling. Miho wasn't nervous. That meant the danger wasn't immediate, which meant it was planned. 5 minutes, Miho said quietly through the door. After that, they'll start adjusting. Adjusting. The word sent a chill through her. Hana opened the door slowly. Miho stood there without urgency, his hands visible, his posture relaxed. He looked exactly as he always had, calm, composed, almost gentle. Only now, Hana understood what that calm truly meant. They left the hotel separately. Miho first. Hana 5 minutes later. No dramatic exit. No running. They blended. Outside, the city felt too ordinary for what was unfolding beneath it. Cars moved through intersections. People checked their phones. Life continued, unaware of how easily it could be rewritten. They met again near an underground parking structure several blocks away. Miho spoke quickly but quietly. There's a window, he said. Not large. Not forgiving. But it exists. And the cost? Hana asked. Miho didn't answer immediately. That depends on how much of yourself you're willing to give up, he said. They drove for over an hour, switching vehicles twice, never using main roads. Hana followed instructions without asking questions, because she finally understood the rule of Miho's world. Curiosity came later. Survival came first. Eventually, they stopped near a coastal industrial zone. Empty warehouses. Wind off the water. No cameras visible. This is where it changes, Miho said. Hana stepped out of the car and felt the cold air hit her skin. The place felt exposed, wide open, impossible to hide in. That's the point, Miho added. They don't expect you to choose visibility. Inside one of the warehouses, a woman waited. Older than Hana. Sharp eyes. No warmth in her expression. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. You're late, the woman said, looking at Miho. Not late, Miho replied. Precise. The woman turned to Hana. You understand what this costs? She asked. Hana hesitated. No, she said honestly. But I understand what staying costs. The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. This will erase you, she said. Your name, your records, your history. You won't go back to who you were. Hana felt a familiar tightness in her chest. And Miho? She asked. The woman glanced at him briefly. He pays differently. Miho met Hana's eyes. For the first time since she'd known him, there was something unguarded there. Regret. This was always how it would end, he said softly. I just didn't expect you to be the one who had to leave. Hana swallowed. Why help me now? She asked. Miho didn't look away. Because loving you was the one thing I never learned how to erase. The woman interrupted. Enough, she said. Decide. Hana looked around the empty warehouse. At the sea beyond it. At the wind moving through broken windows. She thought of the life she had lived. The mornings. The quiet routines. The illusion of safety. And she understood something clearly. That life was already gone. I'll do it, Hana said. The woman nodded and turned away, already moving. Miho stepped closer. This is where we separate, he said. Hana's throat tightened. Will they stop looking for me? She asked. Yes, Miho replied. Because you won't exist to them anymore. And you? Hana asked. Miho hesitated. I'll remain, he said. So you don't have to. The meaning landed heavily between them. Hana stepped back. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Miho reached into his pocket and handed her a small card. No name. No number. Just a symbol. If you ever see this again, he said, it means I failed. Hana closed her fingers around it. She didn't cry. She didn't thank him. She simply nodded and walked away. Behind her, doors closed. Locks engaged. Processes began. Hana felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not relief, but finality. By the time the sun rose over the water, Hana no longer officially existed. And Miho stood alone in a warehouse full of ghosts, knowing he had chosen which part of his life to erase. Hana woke up to a different ceiling. The room was small, plain, unremarkable. That was the point. She lay still for several minutes, listening to unfamiliar sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere below, the hum of an appliance she didn't recognize. No memories rushed in to greet her. No sense of place. Just silence. When she finally sat up, the weight of what had happened settled slowly into her body. Hana no longer officially existed. The name she had lived under for years had been erased. The records rewritten. The connections severed. She moved through the days under a new identity, one that felt like a borrowed coat. It fit well enough, but it wasn't hers. She rented a small apartment in a city no one she knew would ever think to look. She paid in cash. She spoke little. She learned the rhythm of anonymity. At first, it felt like relief. No messages. No watching eyes. No questions she couldn't answer. She walked freely through streets where no one knew her face. But freedom, Hana learned, was quieter than she had imagined. And loneliness was louder. She avoided mirrors at first. When she did look, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her posture had changed. Her gaze sharper. More alert. The softness she once carried had been replaced by awareness. One afternoon, while standing in line at a cafe, Hana felt it again. That sensation. Not danger. Memory. She turned suddenly, scanning the room. Nothing. No familiar faces. No black cars. But the feeling lingered. Miho had said erasure would make her safe. He hadn't said it would make her invisible to herself. Weeks passed. Then months. Hana found work that required no history. Nothing glamorous. But stable. At night, she dreamed of doors closing behind her. Of names she no longer answered to. She wondered often about Miho. Not with longing. With unfinished understanding. Had he kept his word? Had the system truly let her go? Or was freedom simply another illusion she was choosing to believe in? One evening, Hana returned home to find something on her table. A small envelope. No address. No stamp. Just the symbol. The same one Miho had given her. Her heart stopped. She stood frozen for a long moment, staring at it. This wasn't possible. She hadn't used her name. She hadn't contacted anyone. She hadn't left a trail. Slowly, Hana picked up the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper. 3 words. You are clear. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Hana exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for months. Miho had succeeded. But the relief was bittersweet. Because the message also meant something else. That chapter of her life was permanently closed. She would never know what happened to him. Whether he was safe. Whether he had paid the full cost. Hana folded the paper carefully and burned it in the sink. She watched the edges curl and blacken until nothing remained. That night, she slept deeply. For the first time since she left. In the morning, she walked to the window and looked out at the city waking up. She realized something important. Erasure hadn't given her a new life. It had given her a blank one. And now, she had to decide how to fill it. Freedom wasn't about disappearing forever. It was about choosing what came next. And for the first time in a very long time, that choice was hers. Hana didn't change her life overnight. That was the first thing she learned about freedom. It didn't arrive all at once, like relief. It arrived slowly, quietly, in moments so small they almost went unnoticed. The first time she laughed without checking who was listening. The first time she walked home at night without scanning reflections in windows. The first time she said her new name and didn't feel like she was lying. Those moments added up. And slowly, the weight she had carried for so long began to loosen. Hana built routines again. Not the rigid ones she once relied on, but flexible ones. Human ones. Morning walks. Simple meals. Conversations that didn't feel rehearsed. She learned what it meant to exist without being managed. But even as life settled, one question remained. Miho. She thought of him often, usually in quiet moments. Not as the man she married, but as the man who stood at the edge of two worlds and chose which one she could escape. She wondered what it cost him in the end. Because people like Miho never disappeared. They absorbed consequences in silence. One afternoon, months later, Hana noticed something unusual. A news article playing silently on a public screen in a cafe. The headline was vague, carefully worded. An internal restructuring. A disbanded division. A security failure quietly corrected. No names. No faces. Just implications. Hana read the article twice. Then a third time. And finally she understood. The network Miho had been part of had collapsed inward. Not dramatically. Not publicly. But completely. The kind of collapse that erased itself as it happened. Hana felt a strange mixture of relief and grief. Miho had once said someone would have to remain. Someone would have to hold the weight long enough for others to leave. She closed her eyes briefly. And then she let the thought go. That night, Hana walked through the city beneath fading streetlights. She passed couples laughing, people arguing, strangers brushing past one another without consequence. Normal life. Messy. Uncontrolled. Beautiful. She realized then that safety had never been about protection. It had always been about choice. And for the first time, no one was choosing for her. Back in her apartment, Hana sat by the window and reflected on the life she had lived. The marriage that looked perfect. The man who mastered calm. The secrets hidden beneath silence. She understood now that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives softly. With stability. With structure. With a voice that tells you everything is under control. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away before they disappear. Hana didn't regret loving Miho. Love doesn't require regret to end. But she would never again confuse calm with safety. She would never mistake control for care. And as the city settled into sleep, Hana made herself a quiet promise. No more lives lived inside someone else's secrets. Only truths she could carry openly. Only freedom she chose herself. Some secrets destroy relationships. Others reveal them. Hana didn't lose her life. She reclaimed it. What would you have done in Hana's place? Would you have stayed or disappeared? What lesson did this story teach you? And where are you watching from? If you enjoy slow-burn drama, mystery, and stories filled with hidden truths, subscribe to Chronicles. Because every story has a secret. This story has ended. But the Chronicles are just beginning.